In this video, we're diving into exactly what it takes to craft a killer elevator pitch for your music in a way that's compelling and leaves lasting impression. Now, let me throw a question your way first. What makes someone stop and really listen when you talk about your music? Now, whenever someone asks me this, I try flipping the perspective. I try to reconnect with the times I get pitched by artists introducing themselves. And the times I got captured, to be honest, it was because one little thing in the context of their music that makes you lean in and think, wait, this sounds very interesting. I want to know more about this. I want to know more about this artist and his music. Well, I believe that it all comes from one little but big thing that makes you, you. That's why I decided to invite world music artist manager and founder of Free Radical Productions, Allie Silver, to dive into how to present yourself in a way that's clear and unforgettable, starting with your elevator pitch. Allie shares fantastic and very practical tips and proven strategies on how to distill your story and highlight your uniqueness. Now, are you ready to dive into all this? Make sure to watch this video all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Exactly as you said. To me, the biggest problem is that in your sales pitch to me, like as an artist, say I'm talking to an artist, in their sales pitch, they do not explain what it is that they do that is unique and why urgently I should be excited about it. That is like the number one error that I would say most everyone has. And it is I struggle with it with my own projects. It's very hard to do for yourself. And so that's why it's really great to have a mirror, even if you want to just ask your friends or ask your fans, what is it that you love about my music? What is it that you like about my project? Why do you listen to my albums? What does it bring out for you? And sometimes that's a good exercise that really sort of gets the wheels going for people.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite examples is this vacuum cleaner example, because people don't understand as they see, or artists sometimes struggle understanding that it's a business. And sometimes I feel really sort of like evil and selling out, in the art world. It's like, woo, money, business, there's so much taboo around it. But if you are out there trying to sell and make money from your creativity and sell your music, if that's not your goal and you're just doing it for fun, you want to put it out there and you don't care what happens to it, that's totally fine. But if you want to make a viable career with your music, you have to understand that it's a business and that therefore you are selling a product, right? And as cold and as evil as that seems, it's true. And sometimes it's really helpful to really see things in that mindset, because oftentimes artists don't. So I love this vacuum cleaner example, because a lot of times when you talk to artists, and I'm sure, Michael, this happens to you with a lot of the artists that you work with as well, they say, oh, well, tell me about your project. And they almost always say the same thing, where it's like, well, it always starts like that, right? Well, it's a bit of pop and it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. And it's kind of hard to describe, but yeah, like it's always usually very wishy-washy and vague, where it's hard to describe and it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that, right? So imagine I'm trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner and I'm like, oh my God, Michael, you got to check out this vacuum cleaner. It's amazing. I have this I love it so much. I can't stop using it. And you're like, oh, Allie, well, so what's so great about your vacuum cleaner? Well, it's kind of like this model and it's kind of like that, but it's kind of hard to describe. And you're not going to buy that vacuum cleaner. Like you're not excited. If I don't tell you, hey, I got this new vacuum cleaner. It's amazing. It has this speed mode and that speed mode, and it's helped me so much clean up my house really quickly in the short time I have to clean. And I'm so grateful to have it, because it's really like making my life so much easier, right? Then that makes sense. And so, as weird as it can kind of seem in this sort of artistic creative sphere to really see your music as a product that you need to sell, your sales pitch needs to really be sharp and on point. So I'm sure you felt this as we all have. Now, music videos are obviously, it's kind of sad to say, it kind of feels like a little bit of a dying art these days, but hopefully not, because I'm a big fan. But do you remember when you would see a music video and you would be so obsessed with it, and you would love it, and you would immediately send it to all your friends? You like, you got to see this, you know? That spark and that motivation of like, whoa, I discovered something and I'm so excited about it that I need to share and tell other people about it. That's how you need to talk about your personal brand. That's how you need to talk about your music. As if you're not talking about your own music and you're like, oh my God, I just found this amazing new artist. I love it. You got to check them out. Like, and then, well, what is it that's cool about them? Oh man, they have, it's really melancholic and really beautiful. And just like this soundscape is so lovely that when you're in a chill mood and you listen to it, it just like, oh, it makes you feel amazing. The lyrics are so deep and profound, and it's just pure poetry. And it really describes certain situations that I can relate to in ways that I never would have thought of. And it's just really on both a sonoral and emotional level, it's really superior stuff, you know,
Mm.
as a random example. So, like, as an artist, it's very hard sometimes because a lot of artists are very humble. Not all of them, but some of them are very humble in their creative work, that it's hard for them to be their own hype man, hype woman,
Mm.
hype
Yeah.
person, to
Right.
really talk about their music in that way. So, one of the things that I really try and help with as best I can is sort of pulling out that magic thread where we discover together, okay, this, and this is really cool about your project. And you need to know that and understand that so you can go out there and tell it to other people. And then trickling down from that, it should be on your Instagram, it should be on your Spotify bio, it should be on your Bandcamp, it should be on your EPK. And so then you can talk about yourself well, PR people can talk about you well, your label can talk about you well. But at the end of the day, the biggest PR for your own project is you, you know? When people ask you what you do, they see you carrying around a guitar, you have to talk about your project. The person that is most in this world going to be talking about your project, even more so than your manager, is you. So if you have a solid sales pitch that makes people excited to listen to your music, it is going to make everything grow and blossom from there. So that's
Mm.
kind of like the foundation that I try and set with people. And then, like, people come to me sometimes and like, yeah, I want to tour Japan. I want to work on this project. I want to release a double album, like all of these things that are way more advanced. And I'm like, let's look at your press kit first. Let's look at your bio first. Let's look at what we're actually selling before we go 10 steps ahead, right? So that foundation, I think, for every artist needs to be solid. And then from there, everything else gets easier.
Mm. It's a very good point. Very good point. And I think which leads to, which is strictly connected uh, to be precise, which leads to attention, because when we're presenting ourselves, when artists are presenting themselves, whether to industry professionals or music fans or their fans, it's because of the attention they want, which, I mean, there's nothing bad behind it. So I love working with artists, seeking attention is good because you deserve to have attention. So, and attention leads to confidence because I think that when we get attention, we see that we are communicating in the right way to who we are and the things we are doing. So we're much more, confident. And speaking of pitching yourself, what makes a great pitch for you, Ellie? So based on your experience, whether it's, industry professionals or music fans, again, what are the main components that makes a great pitch, a compelling pitch?
Mhm. I think that sometimes what's interesting is that it's less actually about the music that you're selling. It's more about how you sell it, right?
Mm.
And that the project itself is interesting enough that I would want to see it and check it out, you know? So, for example, I was working with a really interesting artist from Berlin, Kay Matron, who does, I don't have their bio in front of me right now, so I want to make sure, but basically a mix of queer pop, metal, and what their story is that they're a non-binary widow based in Berlin who has a whole album of these metal pop rock ballads with very sharp lyrics about the really unique experience and challenging and all of this full spectrum experience
Yeah.
about what it is to be a queer non-binary widow rock star in your young 30s. And when we worked on the bio in the beginning, we were talking about like, okay, there's this, there's that, and these are the topics. But I'm like, wait, this project, like I'm not someone who's super into that genre per se. Like I don't listen to it in my spare time. But this story was so unique that I was like, wait a minute, how you have transformed this like huge, devastating, and tragic experience into having songs like I don't remember the exact lyric now, but it's like, can a widow just have a dance party? Like something really sassy and fun and disco. And I was like, wait a minute. This is so unique and this is so interesting. And what it brought up in me in terms of like when the pitch and the bio was all done in the end, and this was a while ago, so I don't have it so fresh in my head right now, but was like, I want to hear more because I want to hear your human creative expression and how you transformed this experience and turned it into this crazy project. And so even though if you're to say, oh, well, you know, what type of project you do? Well, you know, it's pop rock metal ballads or something. I'd be like, okay, no thanks. Not my genre, not my vibe. But I was like, wow, that's amazing that you did that. I want to see I want to see how you lived out that experience. And so there's something about the pitch and the story that's
Mm.
interesting, that ignites this fire of like, wow, I want to see what you're doing with that, you know? And even if it's like something much more mainstream, you know, I had a session with an artist the other day, super lovely artist, very cool project. And I said, okay, so what's your elevator pitch or what do you do? And she said, oh, well, it's alternative pop. That's it. You know, and I was like, wait, okay, that tells me nothing. That tells me nothing about who you are, about why it's special, about what you do, like zero information, you know?
Mm.
And I think her project, in terms of if you put two projects next to each other, in terms of style and what I would like to listen to, I'd probably the other one is much more my type of a thing.
Of course,
But
yeah.
I had no information about it, you know, to really know what was going on. So I think that the truth is that humans love, since the age of time, love storytelling. And it's not like, I don't want you to be there telling me the story of how your boyfriend broke up with you and you wrote this whole album and how you don't, it doesn't have to be that extreme. But if you have to think of it as like you want to tell a compelling story about your creativity and why it's urgent and important right now, you know, that if you can pique my interest with that, then that really sells it. In the same way we're talking about sort of like viral videos and things. You see an amazing music video, you're like, oh, you got to listen to this. This is so great. You know, it has to have the most successful pitch in my eyes. So it's kind of like an all around and back again answer is that the win you've won if you ignite that excitement fire in me, like, oh, I want to see it. Can I listen to it? Can I watch it? You know,
Mm.
like if you're at a conference and you're showing people describe me the project, I'm like, oh yeah, let me see your iPad with the video. I want to see what you're talking about because it sounds like a really interesting proposal of something unique and urgent. That's actually urgency is something that's really important, not like go run and listen right now, but you know, what is it about your project that out of the millions of artists that are releasing music right now, that is something that I want to write an article about, I want to listen to, I will put on my radio show. Like, what is it that's super relevant about this work today?
Mm. That's a very good question. And I think Uh, and it all comes down to not just about the music. It's also, as you said, about, of course, the story, but behind the story, there are values, beliefs. And are there any practical exercises or strategies you, Ali, recommend when it comes to, for example, crafting a, a compelling pitch and specifically for improving confidence when presenting yourself to industry professionals and also music fans, but also for adding storytelling? Because adding storytelling in the context of electronic press kit is different than, for example, adding just a little bit of you in your Instagram bio. How
Right.
do you usually work with that when it comes to sitting down with independent artists?
We kind of go from like the biggest to the shortest. So what we
Mm.
usually do is we'll sit down, and also feel free, like I offer these sessions. I do them through Music Pool, as do you, at very discounted prices for artists in Berlin. There's a number of us great coaches on there. So for any of you independent artists listening, if you want some assistance and help, there's really affordable ways to get it. But if not, I'm all for empowering everything and where their budget is at the moment. Do this with a friend, do it with your partner, do it with your bandmates. Like, you can go through this together. Um, and really, first, what I like to do is I like to see all the people have a lot of versions of their bios and old versions. So I'm like, okay, let's make a Google Doc, put all of the versions there. Because, for example, I was working with this Brazilian artist the other day, and we're talking all about her project, and she has a really interesting story, and she kind of had this transition from doing more Brazilian pop and then got more involved in sort of medicine music and spiritual world stuff, and now is sort of combining those two things. And she's done some really big stuff in the States. And then we're looking at her old bios, and this is obviously an extreme example. And she worked with Pharrell on a movie, like on a movie soundtrack. I was like, you didn't tell me this when you told me your whole story. She was like, oh, yeah, that thing. I was like,
Uh,
this needs to be in your bio. Like, hello. Sometimes there's really difficult, like remembering all the parts of your story and what's really important. So first, what we try and do, get all the bios together in one doc so you can see everything all together and all the
yeah.
versions, even if it's repetitive. Then I really ask the artist, you can do this with a partner, you do it with a friend, do it with a bandmate, and have them really tell me their story of how they got involved in music from the beginning. Everything from like, well, my dad was a musician, or my dad would listen to these types of records at home. It doesn't need to take forever, but just to get an idea of the context of where the project is coming from. It's very different, someone who's been a classically trained musician their whole life to someone who became a DJ 2 years ago and has boom success with a very different selector way of doing things.
It
There's
is.
so many different types of stories, and all are valid. They're just, in terms of creating the pitch, knowing where the artist is actually coming from the beginning really helps. Not that you have to tell all of that info in the bio, and you shouldn't. A lot of people tell way too much in the bio, but knowing the context helps create that sharp argument at the end, right? So get all the bios in a doc, really have the artist tell their story of like era by era. Okay, I learned the piano since I was 3. Then I was playing in a bunch of high school bands, then I was doing more rock, and then I had this experience where I got into this type of music, and then I was touring with this type of artist. Also, to really get a sense, and this is important in the bio as well, of like, for me as a coach and a consultant, and also for the pitch in general, of like what has worked for this artist and what hasn't worked for this artist. So they'll tell you
Mm.
like, oh, I actually was touring in this other band. It was really successful, but then this didn't work out, or I wasn't interested in that type of music anymore, to also really gauge their experience level. You know, maybe they say, oh, this project is brand new, or this is a first album, but they've toured heavily all over the world with different bands. that's important for the audience in the pitch to know. So for example, right now I'm working with the project for an artist who goes by Wen, it's a solo project of one of the members of a female trio called Femina that I would managed and toured with for many years. And
Yeah.
the band Femina is very successful in Argentina and abroad, has done very well. And she also has another band called Weste that has done very well and toured abroad, had great press internationally. But this project is brand new. So that in that example, like in her bio and in her pitch, we had to be like, hey, this is a very heavy hitting experienced artist who has had these top really cool female based and alternative groups, who has been everywhere all over the world. And this is her new solo project. And this is fresh, the latest. And not just like, this is her first album. Solo. You
And
know, it's
nothing
like
else.
very
Yeah,
important
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
get that
That's a completely
context.
different experience when reading it. Yeah.
Exactly. So bios all together, get the whole story. And then from that, it sort of kind of comes to the surface organically, like what has really worked for this artist, what impact they've had, what's special about their music and why they do it. And then we kind of go through the two of us together and piece the different parts together. And I really feel that a bio for a press kit, no more than 2 paragraphs. We all sort of know this at this point, like no one really reads anymore. I mean, I hope they do, but especially books, yes. But like, in terms of a bio, if you get it, if I'm a booker for some festivals and also a venue here in Mexico, like if I get a super long bio, I'm not where it's like he went to conservatory, like I'm not gonna read it, Like if you give me the most important things of your project in a paragraph or two, just so I get a context of what does it sound like? Who are you? Why is it important right now? Like those are
Mm.
the things that I need to come away with, those 3 things. So even though it's kind of a long process, we get the whole context and then we boil it down to those 3 things and make it concise so they have something relevant. And then once we have the bio, which is already enough of a process to get there, then in terms of the pitch, we look at it and we're like, okay, if I elevator pitch, if I'm standing next to someone, hey, you're sitting next to an old lady on the bus and sees that you have a guitar. So someone who like has no context, let's say, of really what's going on in the current music industry today. It's like, oh, you play music. What do you play? What do you do? Not that she's necessarily your prime customer, but like for someone, imagine who has none of that context to be like, I do this, this, and this. This is why it's important. It's amazing. And she's like, wow, pass it to my grandson, like, or whatever, you know? So it's sort of like we go big to small, reducing it down,
Yes, 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 yes.
really getting to the essence of what's important. It's another exercise if we want to also just be giving like concrete exercises to artists. This is obviously a bit more visual, but one of the things that I really encourage doing, because I had a coach do this with me for another project and it always was super helpful. 2 sort of exercises that kind of help with personal branding, even more on the visual side, but I feel like it's all really connected, is first of all, make a Pinterest board of just things you like. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, the world of my project, just things you like. And when I first had to do that, I was like, but I like so many things. I like bright colors, also like black and white. I like this, I like that, just to get your taste, because your creativity and your creative expression is a manifestation of your taste, So I did that exercise, even though I was kind of like griping through it. And then when I saw the good thing about Pinterest is like it kind of categorizes things together
Yeah, yeah,
automatically.
it is. It is.
When I
Yeah, there's an
saw it, I was
algorithm.
like, exactly. I was like, oh, this is my world. And I can see it really clearly in a way that in my head I couldn't see it. And then this was actually for a photography project, but like then let's say you have someone taking press photos of you and you can send that to them. You have someone doing your album cover and they just understand your world and your taste a little bit
Uh,
more. That's really
100%.
helpful. And also along those lines, another exercise I did was these things always surprise you in odd ways. It's like the exercise was go find pictures either on Instagram or otherwise of like band photos, or press photos that you love and you would ideally like not change anything, not like, well, this, but this color, well, that, but that, like you just love it and you would love to have photos like that and just put your face on it, to express your music and your brand image,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And when I did that, I I was like, oh, I love this. I love Leaf from Bombesterio. I love these like super, as you can obviously tell with my roommate's beautiful paintings back here, like bright, funky colors, loud expressions, confident women. Like I ended up picking things like that. And so my coach at the time was like, great, so we're gonna take pictures of you like that. And I was like, no. At first, I was like, wait, but I like those things, but I don't know if I see myself as that. And I don't know. Like, I had that kind of like shy moment where, and she was like, no, this is your taste. This is what you're attracted to.
Uh,
This is where you are going and like own it, And so sometimes when we talk about our personal brand, even more so than the bio, there's this disconnect and a sort of humbleness of like, well, I don't want to be too loud. Well, I don't want to be. And if you really, when you strip that away and you're like, what is unique about my music on one side and what is my universe that I'm trying to express to people? And those things become really clear, not only in your bio, your pitch, your Instagram identity, it's and your visual identity. When all of those, basically, I call finding that out, finding like the core of the nucleus. It's the core of the cell that then won't be replicated to Instagram, to your press photos, to your labels, to all these other things. So once that like data is in the nucleus of the cell, everything branches out from there and it's much easier. And everything supports that argument of what that is. Again, as I said, it can grow and change in the future, and that's totally fine. But I find when artists are very successful at personal branding, it's extremely clear. I actually wore a shirt with Bjork today because I always use her as my example for this, is that like you see a font and you know it's Bjork, you
uh,
know? You see a font and you could say something else, but you're like, ooh, that's very Bjork. Like she has a very specific font and a very specific way of doing things, you know?
Positioning. Yeah, it's very, yeah. You're right.
Exactly. So that's what I always, not everyone knows this example. I need to probably find other ones, but I'm maybe more old school. I always love the example of Iron and Wine, if you've heard of them, kind of like a freak folk band, Americana-ish. And all of their album art are these like beautiful, sort of sketchy illustrations. And if you look at one of their photos or their Instagram or something like that, you can immediately hear what the music sounds like in your head. It is really a true visual representation. You'd be like, oh, well, it's probably folky and rootsy and it has this image. Like, so everything in terms of personal branding is tracing back to that nucleus, is supporting the creative vision
Of
and the
course.
overall sort of universe and planet that you're creating with your project.